Students from the class of 2022 are going to be providing you with some feedback on how to best complete your extended essay. These students are Alex, talking about character design in manga, Nada, talking about character design in the Disney film Coco, and Hamnah, talking about architecture as connected to MC Escher's tessellation designs.
What have been the high and the low points of the research and the writing process? So let's start with the research first.
The high points probably be looking at the artists and figuring out their intentions with the characters. And the low points were probably finding sources that I could say were academically considered like good enough to be informative for the extended essay, because most of the time, most of these interviews and stuff ended up on websites like Wiki.
What was the writing process? What were the highs and the lows?
The highs were analyzing the characters, because it was just me following stuff like texture, color, just fundamentals, and not really worrying about something that might not be there. The lows were trying really hard not to mention the film.
I was finding a lot of contrasting information, like on sites, like for example with his brothers. I read somewhere that he had two brothers and then there was just one, I found out. So like going through like official websites, I think, and finding, like looking through sources specifically, like I would go down and see where they got information from. And usually I found that they were from like books done by like PhD students and things like that. Those are the most credible. Okay. During the writing process, I struggled a lot with the structure because it just didn't flow. And I had to rearrange it a bunch of times to make sure that... And it was so long, so it was hard. When you're doing it in pieces, it's hard to kind of look at it as a whole.
Yeah, that's true.
So the thing with the cutting really helped.
That's good. That's important to note that really helped.
There were instances in it where when I found something that I was genuinely interested in, I would have this like sudden burst of motivation. And I'd type everything up, even if it was like word vomit. But then I'd go through it and like fix it, and I think that those were like the highlights of writing it, because that's when I realized you should really pick something that you're motivated about. And for a while I was, because it was all new information to me, but I think I started getting sick of it when there was nothing new and I wasn't learning anything and I just had to fix it. So that's what started getting frustrating.
Actually finding, for example, information on why specific artists did what they did is like one of the only sources I had was the art book that I used. That was like where most of the quotes were, where they put their thoughts. I couldn't really find many interviews. I could find some for the head artists, really, but some of the ones I wanted to look at were only talking in the book. But yeah, so the holiday itself is easy. Getting the information about how it originated and everything like that, there's so many different sources for it, which I almost got lost with my sources, because I was like, wait, where did I get this specific fact, because it's like in every website. I was obviously keeping on topic on the art side, because I had never written an art essay that long. So I kept like steering off, obviously, into the history and the film, but I after your feedback I got it a lot better, I guess. But analyzing the actual art of the actual analysis of the art was much easier than most of it. Like obviously I still needed to fix it, but getting to it, like knowing how to do it, was much easier.
What would you have done differently in the research process?
I think I should have researched my information and kind of laid it out before starting, because I think that's why I messed up my structure, because I would write a paragraph and research it there, and then I would go on to research my next section. And I think I should have researched the whole thing, like as a whole, planned it out according to the research I had, and then do it, because then I was reaching points where I couldn't find information for what I wanted to write.
Right.
And that's what messed up my structure.
Probably gathered most of my information earlier, because a lot of things I would be like, oh wait, I don't know this, and I had to go back and research it. Like for the most part, when I was like writing it, I had like section by section. I had all my sources mostly ready, but then I would like lose the sources and the bibliography. It was confusing to list everything because I didn't write it down as I was doing it. So first, I would put the links down and what I got from it as I did it, and also probably made sure that all my sources were at least reliable and actually got who was saying what because of the citation.
Okay. What's the most important thing that you have learned? It doesn't necessarily need to be about the content, it can be about the process as well.
Okay, I learned one thing about the content and one thing about the process. For content, I learned a lot more about how much of the artists, like how certain artists are influenced by only their work, and how certain artists could also have had ideas for years and there was a specific intention for an element of design rather than it was just something they felt inspired by maybe an actor or another character instead. So sometimes design elements aren't kind of thought of from just out of nowhere by an artist like Corey Loftus. He started from scratch. He had Robin Hood as a base, of course, but it was mostly from scratch for the Zootopia characters. But with Paru Itagaki, she has had characters for years. She's had time to like render them, change them, edit them, however she felt like. Where Corey only had Corey Loftus only had a specific amount of time before the movie was.
Okay.
He couldn't do it as freely.
Okay. And what about the process?
Process. I learned how to structure an essay properly because I've never written such a big essay before, and I was really confused about how I'm gonna go about it, and I had to write it a lot of times because of that.
Time management.
Yeah. You say that refrain all the time to me about time management, but I don't know if you're actually taking on board what you're learning. Do you think you're getting better at time management? Genuinely.
No.
Okay. All right.
No. I'm getting really worse, actually. But I think it's just the amount of work I have. I was way better when I had less work. But I learned that I need to time manage. And again, I learned how to like structure an essay because I've always lost marks in structure, even in English. Like there's just something about how I become like I have like tunnel vision when it comes to writing one thing, like one paragraph, and then I forget about the rest of it, and then it just doesn't flow properly. So when I was writing this essay, I think I just learned how to like read through it and then connect parts and make sure that it flows properly.
Time. Because I needed to start much earlier than I did, and also properly organize, making sure it flows right is important. Because if I lose someone halfway through, it's going to be really confusing, and I did do that for a while. So what I really learned with writing an essay specifically is making sure that everything actually is relevant and flows together in like 4,000 words, which I ended up getting to the exact by the end.
What was your greatest challenge and how did you overcome it?
Taking information and then, as you asked me to do, making like inferences. That was really hard because I always felt like I was assuming things that I had no like justification for. But then I learned that that's okay because they're educated guesses and you can find information to support it without explicitly having it there. So that was a challenge, but I learned to do it.
Well, the time management.
Yes, it does.
With time management, since I'd like put it off for a while, and I didn't really have it planned out as well, what I ended up doing was, well, first of all, I looked at examples of other art essays to see how they did theirs and how they structured theirs, so that I can get myself to start like planning mine out. And so then I started like just.
Quick question: did you look at the support essays that I shared with you guys on the drive, or did you look them for elsewhere?
I did find them elsewhere, but I didn't know. I forgot. I think maybe I did look at them. I can't really remember now. But
what would you change in your research if you did another EE? If you did this again, how would you change your research?
I would probably research a little bit on my title before picking it because I really overestimated the amount of information that was available online, and the credibility of, like, for example, the tiles at the Alhambra, I had so much difficulty actually finding patterns that were like explicitly linked to Escher and to the point I was trying to make. Like, they were there, they were just not like the ones I wanted. And I think my research question was a little too, it was specific, which was good, but there wasn't enough information on it. I wish I'd done a little bit of background research before just diving into it.
Okay.
I probably maybe narrowed down what I was researching, like when I started off, and then anything else I needed, I would branch out occasionally, because sometimes I'd have way too much information to present, and I'd have to like take off a lot of things because I didn't need them. So I'd focus on getting more specific research, maybe, and making sure nothing's too vague. And like not overdoing it with what I researched, and like basically just putting information that's everywhere else on, basically regurgitating the information from someone else.
What's the most valuable experience that you took away from the process?
Someone who really likes designing characters. That's like my favorite thing about art. It was personal to me to talk about the subject, and valuable experience would definitely be looking in. But yeah, it was nice to look into other artists' work.
Definitely just generally writing about art, since I want to go into it. Knowing how to narrow it down to specifically art, knowing how to exclude what I don't need was really helpful. And just analyzing character design specifically, because that's what I do want to go into in my future, like character design and animation. So looking at that specifically and how people, like the process behind it, how people get inspired was really helpful for me. So I was happy to be able to write about that kind of stuff.
The thing that the next time you're asked to write an essay, okay, your first year of university, what's the thing that's going to be the thing that you do to make sure you get things right?
Again, like I said before, like make sure to research everything before starting. That's the biggest thing I would tell anyone.
What was the greatest challenge, and what did you do to overcome it?
Greatest challenge. Rewriting it for the second time, I'm pretty sure, was the hardest because everything was wrong. Like, from start to end, the whole thing was, like, wrong. And that I overcame it by just, like, redoing it again, but following a better structure and knowing what specifically to research and being able to pick apart certain things I can and can't include based on my limitations, such as not mentioning the story or psychology or anything business related, just everything.
What advice would you give to next year's group?
Before you pick a topic that you like, because we didn't have this set to us at the time, but before you it doesn't mean you can't really do what you want, but you have to be more aware of whether what you want fits like what you can like write about it. Basically, for example, just because you like a certain area doesn't mean it could be a good topic, because it could be very vague, or like it would be really hard to be able to research about it. And also you have to really figure out if your topic is rooted in the subject that you're picking, otherwise you're going to have a problem.
You have to, teachers tell you this all the time, but you have to pick something that you think is worth your time researching. Because if you don't feel like you're, like, this is worthless, like this is something I don't want to do, it's a waste of time, then you're not going to do it. And I did that. Like, at some point I was like, what am I doing? I don't care about tessellations anymore. So like I think if I was doing maybe, I should give an example in art, but I'm not. If I was doing a book or a movie in English that I loved and I knew inside out, and maybe I would have been more excited to write about it. But this is something I knew nothing about, and I thought I would be interested in it because I did like MC Escher, but I just liked his art. And I think I liked more of his other illusion artworks and things like that than the tessellation one. I don't know why I picked tessellation. But to make sure that information you're picking out is relevant. Like the formal analysis I did, I was so into it that I went on and on and on, and then I realized that none of it is relevant.
Started do something they won't like completely lose interest in, and will just kind of start doing anything that they can. So at least something you're too interested in, but not something that you like too much, because I feel like they'll be a bit sour towards that thing unless they know they won't, like, unless they're sure they won't be. So I'd say start it immediately as soon as you can. Make sure it's a topic they can actually research, not something too difficult, but also nothing too general. So it's just a general.
How would you figure out whether something's a topic you can research?
Well, think of like different ideas and research it yourself for a bit. Like just maybe for one day, like look up and see if you can actually find anything like that's enough. So similar to how we did the comparative study, we had to make sure each artist actually had stuff on them. Because if it's completely empty, you have nothing to write about in the essay,
Right.
and you have 4,000 words to fill. So if you can't like find something to actually argue and talk about, there's no point in pursuing it.
What IB learner profile attribute would you say helped you through the process?
Risk taker, because this whole research question was risky to take. It was like a very, the original question was about specifically anthropomorphic animals on its own, and it didn't really sound very academic, so I had to change it. And I feel like the whole topic was a bit risky because it is it's very new. Character design as a profession is very new, so it was very hard to work with, and I feel like that was a risk.
Being knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Or actually being open-minded, because a lot of the stuff, like the art of like the Netherlands and things like that, I had no clue about, and I had to research, and I found out things I just didn't assume. Like I didn't know about the whole thing where you said the trade and they had other forms of art. I thought it was just like they just had that art, and I think being knowledgeable about just the general context about things it really helped.
I did is probably one of them, because I had to take on like any criticism you made of the essay to actually make sure it was good, rather than say, I don't need that, it's fine. And also because I was researching into a culture that wasn't mine, was really important. So I needed to make sure I didn't misinform anyone, made sure that anything I got was from actual at least people who've researched it deeply or have participated in the culture themselves. So I didn't want to argue as if I knew everything. And then there's also and then communicators kind of in there too, making sure I can communicate the information properly, and also like talking to you about all the feedback that I got.
How did you find this process of writing an essay versus the essays you've written for English or humanities? Do you think that you learned more from this process?
Yes, because this was for English or humanities, it's more like it's research, and then you kind of use your own brain to like your own opinions and your own analysis and things like that. This is more of a research essay, which I don't think I've done that much of before.
Okay.
So it was more like reading information and then not rephrasing it, but kind of rephrasing it, like retelling it and saying why that supports what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So it was a very research heavy essay, and I don't think I've done that before. Like in English, it's like, what do you think about this line? Like, how do you interpret it?